I started swimming competitively when I was 6. I was a swim team brat. Emphasis on the brat. When you're a swimmer like that, you get a certain kind of you think well of yourself, let's just say. And I got a swim scholarship to go to school. And the thing is when you swim competitively in college, you get up and you swim from 6 to 7:30 in the morning, which is an hour and a half. And then you swim 2 hours in the afternoon. You're basically swimming 5 miles a day. It's the equivalent of running 20 miles a day. It's a lot of swimming. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you have dry land weights. So you go to the weight room, and we don't do the big weights like the football players, but lighter weights, lots and lots of reps. But you're at school. You have professors who don't particularly care that you swim an hour and a half in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, and you might have to work 15 hours a week. They don't care. They seem to think you're there to learn. What's up with that, right? So I had a paper due, and it was just crazy. And I thought, you know what, I'm not showing up on Thursday because I got this big paper due on Friday. I didn't go to dryland weights. Wow. Coach comes up to me at the afternoon swim practice, and he said, we missed you in the weight room today. And I said, because I was a religion major, you know, Jesus said that power is in a weakness. So if I get too strong in the weight room, then won't. He was not pleased. He did not think my religious professors were doing the adequate job of explaining the difference between religious faith and physical strength. But the thing is when you talk about strength and weakness, doesn't that just make you go, what? I mean, don't you just think that just sounds kind of odd? Don't we really try not to be weak in anything? We try to be strong. We try to be self-sufficient. All right, guys, how many of you would rather buy a tool than go to your neighbor and ask to borrow theirs? Oh, come on. There's got to be a couple hands. Whoever dies with the most tools wins, right? Self-sufficiency. We got the Donner Party. You have to eat our own rather than ask for directions. We don't want to be reliant on anybody else. We want to be strong. We don't want to be vulnerable. But that's not who Jesus was. And Paul was in this interesting story. Before we get there, if you want to know how healthy this church is, read 1st and 2nd Corinthians. This church was a gifted church. They had spiritual gifts coming out of their ears, but they didn't like each other. My gifts are great. Your gifts, not so much. They didn't like each other. And they had people who consider themselves super apostles. I'm a better speaker than Paul. I have better visions of Paul. I am better in every way than Paul. Listen to me. Now, Paul did not suffer from a lack of ego. Just read any of his writings. But he also knew that he could not one-up them and get where the church needed to go. And he talks about someone else that had the spiritual experience 14 years ago. It's in today's reading, which I cut out. I probably should have left it in. It was shorter. He gets taken up to the 4th heaven, 3rd heaven, I guess it was, in the paradise. And things were spoken to him that could not be repeated. Things were communicated and shared with Paul that Paul could not tell another single living soul. And to remind him, God put what Paul calls a thorn in his flesh. And so for 14 years, Paul feels weakened by this. And he prays 3 times for God to take this thorn that's in his flesh away. And at every time, God says, my grace is sufficient for you. For power is made perfect in weakness. So Paul has to convince this church in Corinth, who is so proud of their power and their strength, that true power lies in weakness. Navajo rugs. Anybody have a Navajo rug or know anything about the Navajo rugs? Awesome. The Navajo make unbelievably beautiful and wonderful rugs. But the Navajo build a flaw into every rug that they make. Because the Navajo believe that it is the flaw where spirit enters the rug. If you think about your life, like where I'm really got my stuff together, and I know it's not that many places, okay, but humor me. Where I have my stuff together, God can't get in. I don't need God there. It's the broken places in my life. It's the places that are not perfect. It's the places where I have a weakness that God has a chance to get in and tell me things and show me things and illuminate. Our country is a strong, powerful country, and sometimes we focus on that and we forget our history. The Pilgrims came over. There were 102 pilgrims. 46 died the first year. 46. An historian remarked that 7 times as many graves were dug as huts were built to live in. 7 times as many. And yet, even though they had to be thinking, why did I get on that boat? Why did I cross that treacherous sea to an untamed country? Why did I do it? But after losing 46, think about it, this congregation, you would have lost 200 members if the ratios held. And they got together and they celebrated Thanksgiving, which eventually became a national holiday. Hemingway said, life breaks all of us. But some of us are strong in the broken places. The Puritans, the Pilgrims, became strong in the broken places. And that was one of the things that galvanized them as a community. We had a civil war where brother was fighting brother and sisters and whatnot. And during all of that time, during all of the brokenness of that, people still stopped to give thanks. Strength is made perfect. Power is made perfect in weakness. World War II, we had a chance to show off who we were. But what happened when all the men went away? Who was left to work in the factories? The women. Rosie the Riveter. Remember Rosie the Riveter? I loved those posters. I mean, she looked just macho. We could not have survived as a country if we had not all pulled together in the fact that we didn't have a workforce anymore. My grandmother would tell me stories about how margarine came out. Remember margarine when it first came out, and how you had to have this little packet of color that you would squeeze in, and then you would mix it all together so that it would look eventually like something you might consume? Because the butter was all going overseas. People collected tin. People collected scrap metal. Everybody pulled in the same direction. Power is made perfect in weakness. We did not have everything we needed. We figured out how to make it work. The greatness of this country is that we pull together in the midst of sacrifice. And so I'm a young guy. I'm, 58, coming up on. So when 9/11 happened, and then we had the Gulf Wars, and I thought, what do I do to be like my grandmother? What can I do to sacrifice for my country? And I was told what? Oh, go shop. Yeah, yeah, go to the mall, buy some things, help the economy. It doesn't feel like what my grandmother talked about during World War II. It doesn't feel like that sense of sacrifice and vulnerability when I'm pulling out a Visa card to put something on a card that I may or may not be able to pay for. I can, trust me. But power is made perfect in weakness. And so Paul just talks about, I'm going to be like Christ who hung on a cross. Who hung on a cross. That's a humiliating death. It takes 3 days, you drown to death. That's how you die in crucifixion. Your lungs fill with water. It is not a nice way to go. And there are a lot of Christians who only put up with that Jesus because they know Jesus is coming back. And when Jesus comes back, boy, I tell you what, he's going to be kicking ass and taking names. And the only reason they put up with the weak Jesus is because Jesus is going to come back and thump some people. Like, wait a moment. Why would Jesus make everything he did and was about in this life suddenly so different? We don't like weakness. But I want to give you an image that I love from Taoism. I love world religions because there is always something that I learn in world religions that helps me understand my own faith. So in Taoism, the strength of the weak, water is a symbolism for yin. Water is feminine. Water is weak, right? What form does water have? Water has no form. It simply goes into whatever container, the lowest point it can find, and then it fills up or not, or spills over. The moon grabs the water and pulls it into tides. It forms waves. Water just goes. But we were standing on the Oregon coast the other day, and I was watching those waves hit those rocks. And there are a lot of places where the rocks are now caves because the water has just beat and worn it down, worn it down, worn it down, worn it down. The Holy Spirit is here as a church to blow us where it will. And sometimes instead of saying, I will be so strong, I will be like a rock that gets worn away. How about, I will be like water and I will go where you send me. I will go where you send me. I will do what you ask me to do. This is not a country that likes to talk about weakness, but I will argue that all of the times we have become truly great, it was because we were vulnerable. And we pulled together and we rose above. Power is made perfect in the moments that we're weakest. And as a church, a lot of people are scared. A lot of people are saying, you know, the mainline tradition, oh, it's going down. Oh, woe is me. But this is an opportunity to be remade. To say, yeah, we're not the strength of the church that we were in the 70s, where people came to church because if you didn't go to church, what? Your Rotary buddies didn't do business with you. You know, there are a lot of people that went to church in the 70s for business reasons. I'd rather have people sitting in church for spiritual reasons with fewer people than lots of people who don't give a rip. And that's me. Let's celebrate the 4th of July. Let's celebrate Christ on the cross. Let's celebrate the fact that we can be strong in moments of vulnerability and weakness because we can rise above. Amen.